Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Given current events, I feel very fortunate about being able to talk about a fictitious upcoming war instead of a real one. It just puts everything into perspective. So I'm grateful for that. And so I'll start this out by talking about Oda's Jump Festa statement, from which we learn absolutely nothing new. I was actually surprised about how little information that statement had because usually he uses those statements to give us like little nudges or hints about what's to come to get us hyped for the upcoming year. But in this statement, it was either him either being vague or talking about stuff that we already knew. A lot of it is just stuff that you can imply just from reading the chapters that we've already gotten, like when he mentions Vivi, Sabo, and Boa Hancock possibly being in danger. We kind of already got that from chapter 956 when we're told that, well, Sabo made the headlines for some very shocking reason. And then from that very same chapter, we also knew that Kobe was on his way to capture Boa Hancock because of the ending of the Shichibukai system. And then we also knew that there was an incident regarding the Alabasta Kingdom. And of course, when we got that information, a lot of us associated that with the Kingdom of Alabasta being the only kingdom to kind of stand up against the world government and say like, no, we're not going to live in Marijoa, we're going to live with the rest of the world. Like they kind of refused their role in the unification of the 20 kingdoms to form the world government. Which is one of the major reasons for why I think that the people of the clan of D, the people with the D initial, chose them, specifically the people of Alabasta, to guard and protect the poneglyph with information about Pluton. So that's why the Gorosei and Imu were kind of, the Gorosei were talking about like, yeah, these guys are kind of traitors, so we should take care of that. So it was already implied that, Vivi was in a tough spot. And so with that in mind, I really want to talk about the major plot points that are left to be resolved in Wano. I mean, we're still currently in a flashback, but I think we have a pretty good idea of how that's going to end. In my opinion, I think it's pretty obvious that the flashback is going to come to a close with Oden's death. So we can expect 2 executions to take place in the upcoming chapters. One for Roger, obviously Roger, being executed. And then of course Oden being executed thanks to Orochi and Kaido. And I feel like we have to get a reason for why Whitebeard didn't interfere. I mean, because Roger was already dead by the time that Oden gets executed, but Whitebeard was still around, so I'm pretty sure that we're going to get an explanation for why it was that Whitebeard didn't interfere with what Kaido and Orochi end up doing. So you can bet that the ending of the flashback is going to be super emotional, because the whole point of that ending is to get us to really sympathize and connect with Luffy's goal of trying to take down Kaido so that we're rooting for him during the final battle of Onigashima. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Oda ends up revealing a side of Kaido that we haven't seen before that actually gets us to sympathize with Kaido as well. And I mainly say this because, well, since his introduction, we knew that Kaido, essentially, like, he wants to kill himself. Like, he wants to die. And then we also know that he has a drinking problem. So those two things combined get me to think that there's something psychological, something that he can't really deal with emotionally, and that's why he does those things. And so I'm pretty sure that his fight with Luffy, because this is shonen, I'm pretty sure that he'll be able to resolve those things with his fight, after his fight against Luffy, because of the nature of shonen. And so I really hope that whatever those things are that he can't cope with is related to the Rock's pirates, because that way his arc gets resolved, then we also get more information about the Rocks. Now, when it comes to the final fight in Wano, there's still some players that we know very little about. Like from the group of the Scabbards, we need to find out what happened to Denjiro and whether or not Kyoshiro is affiliated with them. And there's still that mysterious traitor, the one that's been passing Orochi information, and we don't know who that person is. We also don't know much about the numbers, like who are they and where did they come from? I mean, Kaido seems to know who they are, so does that mean we'll get to see more of them during the Oden flashback before it ends? We also don't know the full lineup of the dinosaur group, also known as the Flying Six, or the Toby Ropo. We need to find out what happened to Page 1 as well, and who the other members are, because we only know 2. We know Drake, who's an Allosaurus, and Page 1, who's a Spinosaurus. But who are the other 4? I've said this before, but I really want to see a Velociraptor in this because that's my favorite dinosaur. Where is the Triceratops and the T-Rex? I feel like those 2 are a must here.
And that still leaves room for one more. So we're missing 4 dinosaurs. And then in addition, we also have Big Mom and her crew in this as well, which we already know about. But the point here is that it seems like the alliance, that's helping Luffy is going to need a little bit more people to take down these threats. And so what I think could happen is that because Luffy essentially got Jinbei to promise him that they would meet up in Wano, I feel like that's pretty strong foreshadowing that he'll show up. And it wouldn't be a problem for him to get there because as a fisherman, he could just swim up that waterfall with his friends to get there. So, plus, I also think that Germa, if they manage to escape, if they manage to escape Whole Cake, they can use their snails to climb up that mountain as well. Or they can use the hidden entrance behind the waterfall, the one that has like a giant elevator. They can use that platform to get up there. But whether Germa shows up or not, regardless, I'm pretty sure that hidden elevator is going to be used during the final fight for something. I guarantee it. Now, in terms of fighting, I would like Sanji to fight Queen, Zoro to fight King, Usopp to fight Orochi, and then Luffy to go up against Kaido, along with a Supernova Alliance that includes Kid and Law. Because I feel like Luffy's fight should be a 3v1 at least. And there are other fights that I want to see, but as long as those happen, those are really the ones that I care about the most. And I think it's also kind of heavily implied that we're going to see, obviously, the Sulong Minks, all of them, because they're planning it according with, the full moon so that they can use that power boost. But I think it's heavily foreshadowed that we're going to see Nekomamushi and Inuarashi use their Sulong form against Jack. But anyway, I think it's important to mention that ever since Wano started in the anime, the animation has been showing something different. You probably noticed this. So what the anime has been doing is that it's showcasing this weird kind of aura, surrounding some of the characters. They've used it with Zoro. They've used it with Luffy. They've also used it with Kaido recently. And so at first I thought that these auras were just like the anime taking its creative liberties to sort of enhance the fights. And I know a lot of people don't like that because it kind of gives it the DBZ feel in a way. But the effect, I think, has been repeated enough for it to just be a coincidence. So I definitely think that it's not just something that they're doing for show. It's not something that they're just doing for fun. I think what the aura is doing is essentially foreshadowing / representing the concept of Rio. Because according to Hyogoro, the idea behind using that next stage of haki is using the excess haki that surrounds your body and channeling it into your attacks. So if you don't know how to channel it, you're essentially wasting some of the haki that you're producing. And so this concept of using that extra haki, that aura, is very important because it helps us understand the power-ups that Luffy and Zoro will be using in their upcoming fights. So for Zoro, the concept of Rio applies to him because instead of wasting it, his new sword, Enma, actually absorbs it and channels it automatically. Like at one point, Hitetsu says that if a normal swordsman were to use that sword, Enma, they would pretty much be drained. So because Zoro seems to have a good control over his own armament haki, that's why he's able to wield it. And this kind of goes along with what Oda said a while back about each of the monster trio specializing in different types of haki. Like Sanji specializes in observation, hence why he was able to dodge Katakuri's jelly bean attack, and Zoro specializes in armament, hence why he can wield Enma. Now, from a power scaling perspective, giving Zoro that new powerful sword also works in Oda's favor because it allows him to not have to show Zoro go all out without Enma's power boost. So here's the thing. If Oda had shown Zoro going all out before getting Enma, I guarantee you that there would be fan debates, all right? Fan debates for days about whether or not immediate post-time skip Luffy could beat immediate post-time skip Zoro. Here's the thing. There's still people out there that think that Zoro could have defeated Doflamingo. And so by giving Enma to Zoro and then have him use the sword in his upcoming fight, we'll never really be able to compare how strong Zoro was to Luffy before this point. Like, how close in power was Zoro to Luffy before Whole Cake Island? We'll never get an answer to that, because we'll never be able to compare them fairly, because Zoro never went all out before this point. So it pretty much kills that debate about how close in strength Zoro was to Luffy immediately after the time skip. And this is because Oda has made it clear that when it comes to the crew, he wants Luffy to be number one, power-wise, in the mind of the reader. Which goes along with the genre, because this is a shonen. But again, there's still some fans that believe that Zoro could have defeated Dofi.
And I think it just comes down to Oda prioritizing plot instead of prioritizing power levels. Like, thus far, I think that Oda has been very consistent with the power levels that he's established in the series, but I don't think that that's, like, the first thing on his mind when he sits down to write One Piece. I think that, you know, the consistency of power levels are like the sprinkles on top of everything. It's not the main thing that he focuses on. He focuses more on story and world building. But then a lot of this also has to do with the current pacing of the series, and you can undoubtedly tell that it's picked up. And he kind of alludes to it in the Jump Festa statement where he says, like, yep, you know, we're hitting that final rush of Wano, and it's become so apparent because stuff that would normally, like, if this were Dressrosa pacing or Whole Cake Island pacing, stuff that would normally take us 1 or 2 chapters to get through, now we just cover it in panels. Like, I remember back in the beginning of the Oden flashback, I thought, oh, we're going to get at least 1 chapter, you know, per scabbard, like Oden recruiting, you know, at least 1 or 2 scabbards per chapter. And at one point there was a montage of Oden just recruiting a whole bunch of them in just a couple of panels. And I don't think it's because he's tired of writing One Piece, although I'm pretty sure that at one point he does have to consider his health. But I think it's more so that he's excited to get to that next big thing. And so taking that into consideration, I actually have some speculation about why the Kaido versus Luffy fight was handled very differently in the anime than how it was presented to us in the manga. I think that, you know, in the anime, Luffy looks decent against Kaido. In the manga, Luffy gets ridiculed against Kaido. It was so bad. In the manga, Kaido was here at one point. He was here and then zoom, and then that was it. Luffy was done. To the point where, because of that scene in the manga, Oda introduced a pretty big power gap between Luffy and Kaido. And so we know that, you know, Gear Force obviously right now has 3 forms, right? It has the attack form, which is Bound Man. It has the defense form, which is Tank Man. And it has the speed form, which is Snake Man. And then I think Rio should technically boost up Luffy's special attack. You know, by Pokemon logic, you know, Rio should be the special attack, maybe even special defense. And I think that would also introduce us to, you know, a new gear, like Gear 5th. Even with that in mind, though, given the gap that Oda introduced in the manga, it should still be a very difficult fight for Luffy, even after all the training that he did in Udon. Whereas in the anime, the way that Luffy was depicted, I'm kind of more willing to believe that, okay, like maybe he has less of a hard time against Kaido. And so what I think might have happened is that perhaps Oda gave the animators a note saying, you know, try to make Luffy look a little bit better against Kaido than what I did in the manga. But ultimately, I do think that the depiction of Haki as this aura that surrounds the body and being able to use that aura in your attacks will lead Luffy to activate a new mode, whether it be a new Gear 4th mode or Gear 5th, that remains to be seen, but the mode will definitely be special attack focused. Because the whole strategy against Kaido will have to be about causing damage to him from the inside out. Luffy can't deal those surface blows anymore. He has to be able to really get in there to cause damage. So that the concept of Rio, is why that was introduced. It'll kind of be like Law's injection shot, but with a punch. So we know the basis of what Luffy and Zoro's power-ups are going to be. Now, the basis for Sanji's power-up is the raid suit. And I think this is why Oda decided to cut away from the page 1 fight. It's because Sanji was barely trying it out, and so he didn't want to show the full potential of the suit just yet. But even then, regardless of that potential, Sanji said during that fight that he was going to have Frankie and Usopp make adjustments/improvements to the suit. So who knows what he'll be able to pull out during the fight at Onigashima. Now, there's still a part of my brain that still can't process the idea of having 2 Yonko on the battlefield, Big Mom and Kaido there at the same time. So I kind of like to split them up, because I don't know what's going to happen to Big Mom. I mean, in the battle. I have a good idea of what's going to happen after the battle.
One of the reasons for why I think that Big Mom won't be defeated until Elbaf, in addition to her connection with the Giants, is that if you look at her dream, it's actually very similar to what I think the end of the series will look like. Initially, her goal was supposed to be about uniting all races so that they could have a place to live in peace. And since I think most of us would agree that by the end of the series, like one of the results will be to unite people, I think it means that theoretically speaking, Big Mom's dream isn't that far off from what Luffy will accomplish by the end. The only problem with her is that she actually forces and intimidates people of different races to live under her. And that kind of goes against what peace should really be about. So she's definitely misinterpreted the goal, but when you compare her to someone like Kaido and Blackbeard, I definitely think that as of right now, she's the most redeemable Yonko out of those three. I just think that her defeat will happen after Wano because, again, her dream is so connected to a fundamental theme of the series. So I'd be interested to see who's going to fight her, if she does fight, if she doesn't get distracted by her hunger cravings. And I think by the time that she does get defeated in the series, we'll definitely have a better idea by then of what the One Piece is really about and what Joy Boy wanted to accomplish.
So it's going to be interesting to see how Oda handles her during the Battle of Wano. Because think about this. Like, in order for her to fight, you either have to have a bunch of characters gang up on her, in addition to the characters that are ganging up on Kaido, or you have to have a Yonko-level character to match her. I definitely don't see Shanks getting involved in this because the whole idea behind the promise of the Straw Hat is for Luffy to be able to meet up with Shanks and return the hat to him once he's at a higher level. It's the whole reason for why Oda kind of wrote Marineford in such a way that the both of them don't meet up. I mean, by the time that Shanks arrives, Luffy's already unconscious because of that promise. He wants Luffy to show up once he's ready to return the Straw Hat. So I don't think Shanks is getting involved at all. But what about Teach? Like, what about Blackbeard? I really do suspect that he has a role to play in the Battle of Wano.
And I say this because I think Oda has made it very clear that Wano is pretty much the most important arc since the time skip. So I think it's a guarantee that we have to see Blackbeard by the end of this arc at some point. I already proposed a theory about how if I were Blackbeard reading the news, I would immediately set sail to Whole Cake Island because that's where the road poneglyph that I need is, right? So I would go and get that and take advantage of the fact that Big Mom isn't there at the moment. And ultimately, Luffy and Blackbeard have to end up in the same place, because they're both searching for Laugh Tale. So even though Blackbeard could technically steal all of the poneglyph rubbings from the Straw Hats, the rubbings are completely useless if he can't read them. So as of right now, all roads point to Blackbeard kidnapping either Pudding or Robin to be able to read those road poneglyphs. And then after Whole Cake, I would make a stop in Wano, and there are three main reasons for why I think Blackbeard would want to make an appearance in Wano. The first one is his obsession with rare devil fruits. I've said this before, but if he waits until Kaido gets defeated or is weakened, after Luffy's alliance has done the work, he can come in at the very end and easily steal Kaido's dragon fruit. The second reason is the road poneglyph, which is in Onigashima Island, which both him and Luffy need. Plus, he can sneak around Wano's borders before the fight or, during the chaos, and he might be able to run into Sunisha and steal the Zou poneglyph there as well. I mean, we don't know where Sunisha is currently, but given the fact that Inuarashi and Momonosuke rode the elephant to Wano, I think it's a safe bet that she's probably still around Wano at this point. So he can kill two birds with one stone in that way, especially if all the minks are going to be away from Zou trying to fight Kaido's forces. And then the third and final reason for why Blackbeard could go to Wano is that he intercepted Gecko Moria. He actually invited him to join his crew. So since Moria has a grudge against Kaido because Kaido killed Moria's crew, he could be able to give Teach valuable information about how to sneak into the country and about the location of the road poneglyph that he needs, in exchange for Blackbeard helping Moria get his revenge on Kaido.
Now, just a quick side note, something that I realized just yesterday. Have you ever noticed that the islands that are hyped up by Blackbeard tend to have skull shapes? Like, it just dawned on me because, they meet Blackbeard in Jaya. And in Jaya, Blackbeard says, I think he tells Nami that Skypiea does exist, all right? And if you remember, Skypiea and Jaya, they used to be like one island. They used to be together. And those two islands form a skull shape, all right? Jaya and Skypiea, they give you the shape of a skull. But if you remove Jaya from Skypiea, Skypiea kind of has like a moon shape. So again, Oda with the moon references. But then, post-time skip, we see Blackbeard hanging out on an island that also has a skull. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if like Roadstar Island or Laugh Tale also have a skull shape associated with them. All I'm saying is that Onigashima Island, the island where that road poneglyph is supposed to be, is also shaped as a skull.
And so because of everything that I mentioned previously about Blackbeard, if he does in fact end up going to Whole Cake before going to Wano, as much as I like Katakuri, because of how sleazy Blackbeard is, I wouldn't be surprised if we see one of Blackbeard's crewmates like Van Ogre or like Jesus Burgess, and one of them ends up having Katakuri's Devil Fruit power next time we see the crew. Especially if they kidnap Pudding to read the poneglyphs, because as we all know, like Katakuri would try his best to protect his siblings, just like he did with Brûlé. Now, even though Luffy and Blackbeard need to get the road poneglyph that's in Onigashima, I think it's important to remember that there's another poneglyph in Wano, aside from the red one. If you remember, back in chapter 934, Brook mentioned that he had found a second poneglyph underneath Orochi's castle. He said the poneglyph was in a basement on the other side of a rock door, and that the room was full of Kokeshi dolls. Now, it depends on who you ask, but Kokeshi dolls, which are of Japanese origin, are usually associated with two things. They can be associated with good fortune, or they can also represent the spirits of babies that have died prematurely. Now, what I find interesting is that when people connect them to good fortune, the luck that they bring is said to be related to the mountain gods. And we've already seen that there's a character referred to as the mountain god during the Oden flashback, which is the giant white boar that was cut in half. But regardless, though, like given how far we are in the story, I'm pretty sure that the secret poneglyph that Brook found is either another message from Joy Boy, or it holds information about one of the ancient weapons, or both of those things. It could be both. If it's about an ancient weapon, though, I think it has to be either about Uranus or Pluton.
And I'm saying this because we pretty much know a lot already about Poseidon. And lastly, just to conclude, there are two plot points that I think also need to come about by the end of the arc, if not at the end of the arc. One of them is a plot point connected to Vegapunk, because if you remember, Orochi requested ZP0 to bring Vegapunk into Wano, so that has to be resolved. I don't know if he's going to make an appearance, but there has to be something that we learn about Vegapunk by the end of the arc.
And then the last point I think has to do with us finding out more about Zoro's heritage, which any hint that we get related to that, I pretty much cover in my reviews. Hopefully there's like a scene concerning Ryuma, like maybe like a passing of the torch moment by the time that Zoro officially returns Shusui to Ryuma's resting place. And that moment I actually see taking place after the battle, after everything is said and done.
That's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Technically speaking, we're only getting 2 chapters this month, so I know the drought is kind of hard to get through. So if you appreciated this video, you know what to do. Thanks again. Catch you guys later. Take care. Bye.